All right. So good morning, everybody. It's so nice to have you all here. I see some people are still trickling in, which is awesome. Thank you for coming. For some of you, this is the second week in a row that you've been able to join us. I'm so excited to have you all here. Today, we're going to talk about trauma and our pets and our survivors' pets. But first, what I want to start off doing is having you all go to the Survey Monkey that I'm about to put the link in the chat. I just put the link in the chat. So if you could all click on the link and go to that Survey Monkey and fill out that pre-test. At the end of today, we're gonna also do a post-test. So I'll send that out too and a survey. But if you could all fill this out for me right now, I would so appreciate it, just so that we could have a good grip on where y'all are for our funders, and just so that you know where you're at. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to do that. It should only take about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute to fill it out. If you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat and I'll answer them. Let me know when you've come back. So, and then I'll get started. Some of you come back, just put it in the chat that you're back from taking the pre-test, or that would be great. Caitlin is finished. Awesome. Let's see how a couple more people. Jenna, thank you. Just give one more minute for folks. Thank you, Megan. And then at the end of the hour, I'll put the second one in there once we're done with our presentation, and then I'll also send it out in an email. Thank you, Anna. And then I also have a survey. If you could all fill out both of those at the end of the hour, that would be amazing. If you don't have time or you can't, I'll send it in an email, just so that you all have it. But again, just so that I can improve on what I'm doing, and also for those funders. I know y'all know about that. It was really helpful for us to have those pre and post tests and those surveys done. So, all right. So I'm going to get started. And I'm going to, one more time, just for some new folks that are coming in, I'm going to put this pre-test up here. If you could click the link and go to the pre-test, I'd really appreciate it. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute to finish it. And I'd be so grateful if you could get that done. And then at the end, I'm going to send out a post test. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to move this. And you guys don't know what I'm talking about. All right, so today we're going to talk about traumatic impacts on survivors and their pets. My name is Samantha Hinchy. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a domestic violence response coordinator for the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. We are a statewide entity that does work on training. We do training and technical assistance for those of you that are new or don't know. We do policy work. My main role is to do that training and technical assistance around the state. Around the state looks real different. It looks like this right now. Usually I'm driving in my car a ton, going to Parker and Sierra Vista and Tucson a lot, Casa Grande, but that's very different right now. So I'm excited to see all of your faces when we can start driving around again. But until then, I'm really super excited that you're all here wanting to learn more about pets and domestic violence. So we've got something at the coalition called the Barrier Reduction Collaborative, which is basically a barrier reduction fund for folks, for survivors that have pets. And even though, like, I don't want to call pets barriers, because we love them, we need them, it is a struggle sometimes to find resources. And next week on Wednesday, the 26th, I'm going to be doing the last webinar for this BaRC series that's talks about co-sheltering and advocacy and resources and things like that. And so I'll be sending out a flyer through the listservs at the either later today or early tomorrow morning so that y'all have it. But if you want to mark your calendars right now, Wednesday, August 26th, 10 to 11, co-sheltering, last BaRC. I hope to see you all there. But in the meantime, let's get started so that we can get done on time, because I know we're all busy people. So before we get started in this amazing training, I hope it's amazing, I just wanted to ask, if you could have a Disney animal sidekick, which animal sidekick would you want? So please put this in the chat. For me, it's Maximus from Tangled. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for getting your pre-test done. That's amazing. But for me, if you want to put your answer, and if you don't love Disney, that's okay. You could put some other animal from a movie that you love. But for those of you that know me, I'm a big Disney person. Abu, I love it. From Aladdin. Yes, mine is the horse here from Maximus from Tangled. I love him. He's got the greatest personality. Thumper, Colleen, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So cute. My daughter asks, she's 16, she's almost 17. She still asks for a bunny at Easter. And I'm like, this is a 5-year-old question. Why are we? But I guess, you know, yes, from 101 Dalmatians, Thumper again, the bear from Brave. Awesome. They're so cute. Hey, from Moana. Yes, the chicken. I just want that to go around. Tigger. Yes. Eric, I'm here for it. That's awesome. Eric, I'm so glad you joined us today. That's great. Yes. Anyone else? Oh, Pegasus from Hercules. Pegasus. I'm a fan. Yes. Sebastian, just to our conscience. Like, to me, Sebastian is like almost like a Jiminy Cricket, but yet he gets himself into so much trouble because he can't say no. I love it. I love it. Yes. So we love our animals. That's what I'm hearing. We love them. We want them to be safe. This is great. Thank you all. Thank you. All right. So some objectives that we have today is, so we want to review what trauma is for humans. We want to look at the effects of trauma in animals and how can we support survivors when working with their pets who have been affected by violence in the home, and then some strategies on how to heal. So pets and the human bond, a mutually beneficial and dynamic relationship between people and other animals that is influenced by behaviors that are essential to the health and well-being of both. This includes, but is not limited to, emotional, psychological, and physical interactions of people, other animals, and the environment. So it's really important that we recognize, just before we start off, that there is a human bond. And I think last time we talked about that the effects of the human bond, whether it's severed at a young age or it continues on until that animal passes away through natural means or violent means or whatever, like that bond stays with us forever. Like, I remember my first dog and the way that she passed away, and how like that will stay with me forever. And so our bond, especially for children, right? Like we talked about last week, just for those of you that weren't here, we talked a little bit about you know, that animals are in 80% of the dreams that children have when they're little, and they're in almost every single fairy tale that we subscribe to as children. Like, think about the fairy tales that we look at, right? Like, there's an animal in some form, whether it's a sidekick, whether it's an evil like entity, whether it's, you know, and I'm going off of the Grimm's fairy tales, but even like the crows that attack the sisters from Cinderella and peck their eyes out. Like, there's an animal there. They're in our sphere at a very young age. And so that pet and human bond is really significant, even as children, even for cultures that don't have like companion animals living inside the home. They're more like, okay, dogs stay outside, or why would I have a dog as a pet, or any sort of animal. We still have a bond with them because of those dreams from being a child and those fairy tales that we subscribe to. So this is from a survivor, part of our share committee. She said, my pet gave me a purpose to live on every day because she needed me. Animals are the only ones to ever show me unconditional love, and she saved me from myself. What a beautiful thing to say. And also, like, I mean, obviously extremely sad, but I just thought that this quote was so beautiful, and the way she wrote it, she saved me from myself. You know, and just like, that's a survivor's experience, and so we want to honor that, and that's what we want to do. We want to continue, we want to make sure that we're honoring not just the survivor and their experiences, but the pets and their experiences too. If that's a resource for that survivor, we want to make sure that we have the resources. So let's talk a little bit about trauma. So let's talk about trauma in humans. And I'm not going into in-depth neurobiology of trauma. This is just like a little bit of trauma so that we're all on the same page. So it's a noun, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience, or it results from adverse life experiences that overwhelm an individual's capacity to cope and to adapt positively to whatever threat that person faces. So we really liked both of these ways of looking at it. So traumatic events overwhelm the ordinary systems of care that people give a sense of control, connection, and meaning. Powerlessness. This is what we feel like when trauma happens to us, that there's a sense of control that is lost, and it affects the sense of connection to yourself and others, and other relationships, right? And relating to, and also relating to those around us, whether that's our pets, our friends, our family, our partner, whomever. And then what happened wasn't supposed to happen. So that's something that we don't really think about. Like, it's like, we're not supposed to have traumatic events that happen to us like daily in our lives. So what happened to us? And so that's why it's so poignant. So it sticks out in our mind. That's what makes it traumatic. And it affects all aspects of our life. Whether like, it affects if we're a woman, if we're a man, if we're gay, if we're straight, if we're trans, if we're Black, if we're white, if we're Latinx, if we're Asian. Like, it affects just all aspects of how we deal with others and how we deal with ourselves and see ourselves as we go through that traumatic event. And there are multiple definitions of trauma, and those definitions vary according to who is holding the power to characterize what trauma is. So trauma has different interpretations of trauma. There's just different interpretations of what it means and what it is. It can be strict, like a murder, like if a murder happens, if we see that murder, if it happens to a family member, or it can be coping skills. And then the field of trauma is dominated by men. So that is a place of power and can also characterize what trauma is. And then feminist theory, power is always a defining feature of trauma, in that all of us feel or are powerless in that moment of trauma, if not beyond it, right? And then here's some examples of what trauma is, or what it can be. It could be a natural or man-made disaster. It can be an accident, car accident, or an accident inside your home. It could just be stubbing your toe. Intimate partner violence, sexual assault, war or combat, immigration, racism, persecution, neglect, chronic or serious illness, infertility, child abuse, breakup or divorce, incarceration, homelessness, financial devastation, death of someone close, and animal abuse. So this isn't everything, but it is a wide array of things that can happen that can be a traumatic event. And so trauma is not the event. It is how the body reacts to that event. So when something traumatic happens to us, it's how our body reacts to it. So the way we start to think and the way our memories can shift, so that we can't remember everything that happened. But it's not the trauma itself, it's how our body reacts to it. And that's why it's individualized. Trauma is different for everybody. What might be someone's trauma, me stubbing my toe, might be a traumatic event that I had today, but someone else stubbing their toe could be nothing to them. So we want to understand the scope of the problem. Trauma is not rare, it's actually quite pervasive, right? Because it could be anything. It could be anything that is out of the ordinary in our day or in our lives. Trauma's impact is broad and diverse. Trauma's impact is deep, life-changing, and life-shaping. Trauma affects people, how people access services. So if we have had traumatic events if our survivors have had traumatic events with law enforcement, it might hinder them from reaching out to law enforcement again and asking for those services. Same goes for DCS, same goes for getting TANF, same goes for advocacy. If they've had some sort of, if there's a barrier to them accessing services, it could be because they could have been re-traumatized when they were reaching out for the services that they needed. And many systems have been re-traumatizing, right? So everything that I just kind of talked about can be a re-traumatizing system depending on how we talk to people, right? Because words matter. So a little bit about animal trauma. So like people, animals react to trauma in many different ways. How it presents itself in that animal is individual to them. So, right, it's almost exactly like how it happens with humans. So for example, the US military has seen a reaction to stress in its working dogs. Its veterinarians say that about 5% of those that have served in Afghanistan or Iraq suffer from canine PTSD. Sometimes you see it as CPTSD, which could make dogs aggressive, timid, or unable to do their jobs. And then imagine a mental illness so powerful that it has the power to affect both humans and animals. That is the impact of post-traumatic stress syndrome. So I'm not going to talk about PTSD, but we do know that a lot of our survivors do suffer from this. We're not going to diagnose them. We know that we need to have them be diagnosed from a certified counselor or therapist. But this just goes to show how powerful trauma is. That the trauma that happens inside the home or when an attack happens or when something happens or the stress that happens with our survivors can be put onto the animals living inside that home. So much like in humans though, symptoms of stress and anxiety in animals can differ for every animal. And of course, the patients cannot, the animals cannot describe them, right? So, and we're gonna look at another slide about this, how animals can't describe actually what's happening to them or how they're feeling. They are observable reactions to events and objects that might remind the animal of the traumatizing event. Some animals might pace, weave their heads back and forth, bite themselves, or even eat their own feces. And others, this is from an article from the Washington Post. Other signs are self-calming techniques such as excessive licking, rocking, or hiding. So is what any pet owner might chalk up to depression, a loss of interest in socializing, eating, or playing. It's funny because when we go to, some of you know this, Doreen and I at the coalition, the DV response team, we go to DCS and do a 3.5-hour training with DCS caseworkers. And I always bring up the fact that they need to be looking for what's going on inside the home to see who holds the power there, and to see, you know, and animals are a great way for folks to do that at DCS if they're doing home visits, because sometimes I mean, like, they just need to ask about it. They need to like, if you have an animal cowering in the corner or excessively licking themselves when a certain person walks by to self-soothe, they need to be asking more questions, right? Or if they've got a bandage around their waist or they're wearing the cone of shame, we need to make sure that we're asking more questions. So that's definitely something that we talk to DCS about, because they have access inside homes where maybe as advocates we don't do that. And they'll be able to have a better understanding of like who holds power inside that home by asking more questions about who takes care of the animals and what happened to that animal. So some trauma responses in animals could be exhibit a variety of effects and behaviors like we just talked about. Dogs lose trust in other dogs and or humans. So I just, in January, I adopted a dog. I was at an event for the BaRC Fund and I fell in love with this dog. Her name is Faith. I love her. And she has a lot of issues with other dogs. So I have another dog and they're totally fine. But when I take her for a walk and another dog either runs up to her, barks at her, barks from the window, she goes into full-on panic mode. She just isn't comfortable around other dogs that she doesn't know. And so and she had a very traumatic like puppyhood, from what I understand from the folks that I adopted her from. She's very happy now, just in case you're wondering. She's very happy. Animals can retreat to find safe places to hide. So a lot of animals will go underneath a table, or they'll find a corner, or they'll go under a bed. Animals may prefer to keep to themselves and not interact too much. They might have extreme body language. So this could be their ears are back, their teeth are showing, you know, they look like they're going to bite or attack or bark. This is an extreme body language, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this dog is dangerous. It means that they're having a traumatic moment, right? Which happens also for humans, right? Like this, like we've seen people come into our programs and just be angry at the trauma that's happened to them and how their body's reacting to it. And maybe some re-traumatization has happened, but people can be angry. Animals can be the same way. And so we need to learn how to, and we'll talk about this next time talking to staff about extreme body language in animals. Cats also, and I feel like I'm talking about dogs, but cats as well. Cats will, you might see their teeth come out, their ears go back, the hair on the back of their back might stand up. For smaller animals like guinea pigs and turtles and things like that, they may cower in a corner or hide in their shell, or like dig underneath like the stuff that's on the bottom of their cage. So it could be anything. They might want personal space. If provoked or approached the wrong way, the animal can react nastily. And then issues with food and with relationships. So physical abuse, just as it does for humans, physical abuse takes on an emotional toll for animals. Being hurt physically can also damage the spirit. We talked about, last time we talked about how perpetrators don't see animals as being sentient beings, as them being beings with like entities with feelings, and that they don't feel what's going on around them, and they can't feel the hurt or the pain, especially if there's no abuse happening to them. The most disturbing factor is that pets, dogs specifically, want to please their humans so badly that they will do almost anything asked of them. And this means that humans who deliberately hurt pets are taking advantage of their most endearing qualities of love and loyalty, right? So I put up a quote. We have a great quote from one of our share committee members, and she talks about how her dog was so loyal to her and would stand up for her and would get in the way of the abuse, and that perpetrator could see that this was happening, and so he started turning the dog to be on his side, right? Which we see sometimes with children in that sort of relationship, but the dog started attacking her instead of protecting her. So that perpetrator just took those endearing qualities of love and loyalty and used them against this survivor. So there's just not much research about emotional abuse because, like we looked at before in another slide, they can't talk to us. Like there's no way to measure emotional abuse when it comes to animals. Most of the time it is emotional abuse because animals can feel what's going on in the home. The animal was a controlling factor or it was neglected. A lot of times animals get words thrown at them. When we were talking to folks from the share committee, a lot of them talked about how their animal was never physically abused, but their animal was told that they were dumb or stupid or called names constantly. The pets don't believe that they will always be taken care of when this happens, and that the bond is not strong within the home. And so the bond may not even be strong with that survivor just because there's so much turmoil depending on what's going on in the house. Neighbors are more likely to report suspected animal abuse than child welfare, domestic violence, or elder abuse cases, thereby making their local humane society, SPCA, or animal control agency a first responder and the first point of social services contact for a family in crisis. So there's actually been kind of a spike that's been happening during COVID. It's really interesting because child welfare has gone down. Like DCS has been really calm. We've been telling them like this week with school starting, it's about to change. It's gonna be crazy for them probably for the next couple of months because the majority of calls that they get are from teachers. But during this time, as people have been home, they've been able to notice more things about their neighbors. And so we've seen a little bit of an uptick with phone calls from to the humane societies and first responders and animal control agencies around the country. Isn't this the cutest picture ever? I just love it. But how advocates can help. So as an advocate, we want to be careful not to get stuck in the details of the story when we're trying to help survivors like grow and start to heal with their pet. So if you're at an agency or you're a mobile advocate and you're working with someone that has a pet, we don't want to talk about all of the sad details because that really, like, the animals hear those things. And we also but I don't want to say that we don't have these conversations with our survivors at the same time because we should be utilizing our listening skills, right? Like for those of you that have had any sort of advocacy training with Doreen, listening is like the #1 thing that she talks about and utilizes it in the trainings. Because we should be using those listening skills. So whatever story our survivor is telling us about them and their pet, we need to make sure that we're listening to them. But as we are starting them down that healing journey, unless there's safety issues that are involved there, we just don't want to get too stuck in the details of the story, just so that it doesn't stay in that traumatic place for either of them. Listen and reflect back to the survivor and what you heard. So we not only want to listen to what they have to tell us about their story, but we want to reflect back with them to make sure that we're getting all of the things that they want us to know about what needs to happen next, and all of the things that they want to tell us for as we work on their case management and as we advocate for them. depending on what they need and what their needs are. So if you're talking to someone and they're like, I cannot leave without my pet, like we want to make sure that we're reflecting that back and that we're not working against them. We want to walk beside them, right? We want to walk beside them and start building case plans and safety plans for them. And if a pet is a concern, for their pet. And then make sure that as an advocate, you are doing self-care, especially if you are working with folks with pets that have been, that is part of their story. Because, and for those of us that are really connected to our pets or have pets that we have been connected to in the past, we don't love looking at these things. This is why neighbors are more likely to call on pet abuse than child welfare, because our society has a really strong bond with pets, right? 80% of the households in the United States either have or have had a pet as a companion animal. And so like we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves and make sure that we're doing the self-care that we need to be able to do this work around pets and domestic violence. Even just doing the research for these trainings, there was a moment right after COVID hit and I was just at home and we'd been home for like 2 weeks and I had just done I just kept reading article after article after article after article. And a couple books were in there at one point, and I had started having nightmares about animal cruelty and had to like step away from doing this work. And so now I'm really try to balance out what my work involvement is, but I was just hammering so hard, trying to get such good information and relevant information for you all that it took a toll along with COVID. And I started having nightmares. And so I don't want to see that happen to any of you. So I wanted to make sure that we put in the self-care piece because it just like, we just got to talk about it. It's just important. We want to help the survivor become the pack leader. So when we're doing work with pets and survivors, an animal who has been let down by humans needs an example of one they can trust and follow. And they might not have the strongest bond with their survivor who got them out, saved them, found resources, whatever that looks like. So we want to help them become that pack leader. And I'm not telling you that y'all need to become animal behaviorists, but we need to have resources for them both and help with their leadership skills. So help the survivor with leadership skills within and pledge to be their animal's leader, navigator, provider, and protector and stuff. And we want to make sure that they're able to go on walks with their animals and have conversations with their animals and be with their animals as they're both on this healing journey. We want to help the survivor find calm and confidence. And this goes to whether they have a pet or not, but especially when they have a pet, this combination of energy is the best match for traumatized pets. Animals do not follow instability, tension, frustration, sadness, anger, etc. Right? So whatever that means for that survivor, because we can't, like, sometimes there is going to be instability when a survivor is, and tension and frustration and sadness and anger, because that's their trauma, that's what they're going through and stuff. So we just need to try to help mitigate some of those things and find calm and confidence. This is where we, safety planning and walking with them and listening to them and giving them choice, right? We want to give our survivors choice and let them kind of follow their healing path. And this will work a lot in favor of those pets. And shelter, and if we're talking specifically about shelter, like shelters are safety spaces and stuff. So there is a moment of calm and confidence that comes when people come into shelter. And since they may be feeling extra sensitive or intense, excitement can cause anxiety and nervousness for either that survivor or that pet. And animals follow calm, confident energy. This is what they see as safe and trustworthy. So again, making sure that we have calm spaces for our pets and our survivors, because Survivors too, they need calm, they need confidence, they need to know that they're in a safe place. They need to know that those advocates that they're working with are safe people, whether this is mobile advocacy or shelter advocacy. Want to help survivors with space and time. So healing takes time for both humans and animals. I've had my dog that I told you about since January, and sometimes she still has issues, and we just work through them as much as possible. But she's mostly just a big cuddler at this point. But sometimes some things kind of turn their heads, especially when we go on walks. She's very nervous. Communicate with the survivor about the space they may need with their pet. What does that look like? Do they need time alone with their pet? Do they need to be with their pet? Do they need to be in a room with their pet? What does that look like? Can they take their pet for a walk? Do they need space from their pet? Some survivors, most of the time survivors want to be with their pets as they're healing or as they're finding safety, but some survivors need space to focus on themselves. And so what does that look like for them? And again, giving them choice. And we aren't always able to do this depending on what it looks like in our shelter program or our advocacy program. We may not be able to do this all the time, but just if there's a way for folks to have choice with how they are healing with their pet, then that's just all the more resource for them. Most folks, though, they want their pet with them, and it's better for the pet to have that human contact. But again, I'm not going to tell someone how to heal, right? Like, that's definitely not our job. Do not take it personal if that survivor needs space with their pet. Both pets and their humans may be overwhelmed with their situation. Keep it in slow-mo. Working with pets and humans who are learning to trust again cannot be rushed. We need to find our most patient self and always move slowly, literally and figuratively. Sometimes I feel like we just, as advocates, sometimes we can just get in a rush. Like we're rushing, we're going from this person to this person to this person to this person. And sometimes not only for the folks that we're working with, for their pets, but also for our own self-care, we kind of need to slow down and take a breath and kind of, shake it out, Etch-a-Sketch it out, for those of you that know that reference. Use your Etch-a-Sketch time in between the clients, the residents that you work with and that you're seeing, and kind of relax and breathe and get ready to talk to someone new, and just make sure that you're slowing down a little bit. Set goals for your work with a pet and their human, and create baby steps of progress in between. So another survivor said this: it helped me in that I knew some entity loved me no matter what, and I wasn't a bad person. So our pets are really important. Our survivors, they really love their pet, and they really want to make sure that that pet is safe and that they don't have to leave it behind. This comes from the NNEDB census in 2018, and I just love it. So it just goes to show that we definitely have the capacity to help folks. A survivor called our hotline to ask whether we accept pets in our shelter. When he heard we do, he cried. His husband threatened him that if he ever left or went to the police, the abuser would kill his dog. When he entered the shelter that night, he said he felt safe for the first time in years. Like, that's why we're here. Like, that is why we're here. It's so, and I talked about this last time. We're already letting folks come in that have service animals. So how hard is it to pivot to letting folks come into our shelter with companion animals? And so that's kind of what we need to look at as we continue on. And next time we're going to be talking about co-sheltering. But I want you to think about those things. So only 27% of the folks have enough resources for their pets. So that means that 68% of people, no, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, I forgot the statistic from last time. I'm going to be honest. But the statistic I do know says that 68% of folks are not getting their needs met when they're calling a hotline or coming into shelter. And so those 68% of people, we can help them. We can help them by pivoting just so smallly and so slightly. Even by having a crate or two in your shelter or in your program can help immensely with getting folks the things that they need for their animals and their pets as we continue down and help people. So just think about the small pivot from going from like we have to take service animals. So how much of a pivot is it for us to take companion animals as well, to make sure that we're serving as many people as possible, because everyone deserves to be safe, right? So trauma is isolation, right? We looked at this in the beginning. Trauma is isolation. We don't know how to focus on ourselves. We think in a jumbled mess instead of a linear way. Our relationships suffer with other people in our communities and within our families, our friends, our communities. And we want to make sure that healing is connection. So when people are starting to find that healing and starting on their healing journey, they need connection. They need connection with people. They need connection with their pets if needed. If they have a pet coming into us, I love this picture. It's so awesome. But healing is connection, and that's what we want to do. Especially for the folks that are coming into our programs that have been so isolated. Let's remember that isolation is such an incredible tactic. It is so useful for perpetrators, and it really does a number on people when they're coming in. And so we want to have that healing connection. And whether that's with the folks that are staying in shelter, or the advocates that are working in shelter, or the mobile advocate meeting someone down the street for safety, or someone that has bringing their pet into their program, like we want to make sure that we're connecting with people, because that's how we start the healing journey. And that's why words matter, because we don't want to re-victimize folks. Empathetic connections. So emotionally attuned interactions between humans and other animals that depend upon and promote emotional closeness, physical closeness, care of self and others, and an awareness of others' needs that may be different from our own, right? So we need to make sure that we have an awareness of others' needs, and that we're doing those things. And then with these connections comes feelings of rescue, refuge, and sanctuary, not just for those people's pets, but also for those survivors. So the most potent ingredient in healing is the therapeutic relationship. One does not have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. And the second most important ingredient is positive expectancy be the ambassador of hope. So our pets and survivors' pets can be that ambassador of hope. There also aren't therapists. And I think that this is really important for us to look at, is that there is such a strong connection between humans and their animals, especially if they've been living in trauma and they got that pet, they either brought that pet to the relationship with them, or they got that pet when they were in the relationship as a means to have some sort of connection with something, which is something that our survivors talked about, having that human bond being ripped apart for them. So they reached out to their animals to build the animal bond, since they weren't getting the human bond inside their home. We need to remember that those pets and us as advocates, we can be that positive expectancy. We can be that ambassador of hope. Do we want to cheerfully tell people it's going to be better tomorrow? No, we do not. We can't guarantee that. We can't promise that, right? But a little bit of, safety planning is hope. Meeting with your mobile advocate is hope. Filing for an order of protection for some people is hope. Filing for divorce for some people is hope, just depending on what's going on in their relationship. And also like being able to bring their animal as a healing resource for them, that is hope. And our animals can be hope for us, and they can be for the survivors that we're working with. So that's all I have today. So this is me in the middle, Samantha Hinchy. Doreen Nicholas is our response manager. And then I have question marks because Ruby has recently left us to go pursue her dream working with kids. And so we're in the process of hiring a new person. So, but I didn't want to take this out of here because I know it's going to be so exciting when we get someone. Thank you all so much for coming today. I hope that this right here is some self-care for you, because this little hamster eating carrots is self-care for me. I am going to, we're done a little bit early, but please don't go away yet. I want to first ask if there are any questions. And I also want to make sure that I put up the chat. I also want to make sure that I put up the SurveyMonkey, the post test. If you don't mind filling it out, I would really appreciate it. So let me get that for you. Does anyone have any questions today about anything? Like I said, there'll be another one next week in regards to co-sheltering, and that will be Wednesday, August 26th. All right, so here we go. What is happening here? So there's the SurveyMonkey for the post test. If you all wouldn't mind filling it out, I would so appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. Does anyone have any questions or anything, any comments, concerns? This one's a little bit shorter than last time. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I hope you enjoyed it. The next thing that I want to put up for you is my survey. And again, if you don't have time right now, that's completely fine, but I would love for you to fill this survey out. And let me just find it. And I will also send you an email as well with the survey in it. Thank you so much. Great training. I appreciate that. I hope it was. So there is that. Thank you, Megan. You're the best. And if anybody, I'm not gonna, if you want to email me, you can email me and I'll send out the slides. Here's my email. I know someone just asked me for them on my email. So if you want to email me, I can send you the PDF for it if that's something that you want, for sure. And then, so just, yeah, great questions. And then, like I said, a flyer will go out either today or tomorrow with the information for next week's on August 26th, talking about co-sheltering. We're gonna have, I'm hoping to have a little bit of a discussion in there about partnering with folks in the community or what we can do for funding. So, so I'll make sure you're all not muted. Any other comments? I'll stay on here for a minute if you want. I'll also put that survey up here again. So there's the survey. If you all could fill out the survey. Oh no, Michelle. The screen is dark.